And good afternoon from a very wet Pittsburgh today. I hope where you are it's nice and bright and sunny and cheerful, but here it's quite miserable. Still warm, but very wet, which is probably a good thing because we did go nearly 2.5 weeks without any rain at all. So, yes, this week it's part 2 of our Harlem Renaissance discussion with Tome. He'll be joining us in a few minutes. Let me begin by thanking the Allegheny Foundation for their sponsorship of these webinars, which is a wonderful gift to us, makes it all possible and ensures that we will be going right through the year. You can find the programs that we've already presented on the YouTube channel. In fact, if you're watching this one but didn't get the last one, well, 2 weeks ago was the first program on this one, and it's there on the YouTube channel if you want to take a look at it. After today, take a look at it. Hello, Marlene. Back from scenic Kalamazoo. No, yeah. Yes, but you know, you're in lovely wooded Michigan there. Hello, Shelley. Yes, you will be hearing much more about the Harlem Renaissance. So as I say, it's with the previous program from 2 weeks ago, together with every other webinar we've done. They're all there on the YouTube channel. So please, if you haven't already, go to the YouTube channel and become a subscriber there. It makes a lot of difference. The more subscribers we have, the better. And tell your friends about it too. There you are. You can also, while you're there on our website, you can make a donation. And as I say, quite frequently, every donation counts, no matter how much you think you may or may not be able to donate. Please give us something. It really does make a difference. The webinars are free. There's no cost. You don't have to. But if you feel a little generosity in your heart, please give us just even a few dollars, a few euro, a few whatever you have. Every single donation counts. There's Jared from drizzly, dank, dreary Dublin. Ah, yes. Well, in a funny sort of way, when I look out of my window there, it feels very Dublin-esque. The rain is coming down miserably. It's just not cold, which is also very encouraging. Hello, Dennis from Greensburg. Glad you're back. And Linda, hello. There's Barry from Mary Lou and Barry from Shadyside. Welcome. Grace, Tome, looking forward to be, yes. We're glad you enjoyed it, and it's good to have you with us. Look at those pretty flowers. Is that your garden? Very nice. My garden, actually my roses are doing very well. I think it's the heat and the wet. But I've suddenly got an explosion of roses in the garden in my back. Always do feel free to ask questions. You can do it on the chat line if you can find the chat key. If you don't use the chat, you can always send us an email. We will try to get back to you. In fact, I will make every effort to get back to you to respond to every email we get. So feel free to ask questions, to make comments, to disagree. You're perfectly allowed to disagree with those. As I always say, everything I tell you may be wrong. I'm sure Tome wouldn't ever tell you anything that's wrong, but always, you know, the window is open. This is a webinar. In other words, it's a discussion. It's not a lecture. And your opinions matter to us. We learn from your opinions. Hello, James from White Oak. So like I say, it's there's lots of activities for you to do. Go to the website, you'll find them. Signing up and becoming a subscriber to our YouTube channel, making a donation, or even sending a question, a comment, or even a complaint. Not that you'd ever want to complain, but if you do, you know how to do it. Now, who else is out there? We had very, very good attendance for the last couple of weeks. Some people stay quiet. They don't like us to know they're out there, just in case they may not like it. But you can always say hello. We like it, whether you like it or not. So always feel free to put your name up there and say hi. It's very encouraging. Yes, next week we are discussing with Montez Freeland. We are going to be discussing the remarkable American poet Maya Angelou. We're gonna basically talk about her and her writing. For those of you who know the works of Maya Angelou, we hope it'll interest you. For those of you who don't know the works of Maya Angelou, we hope it will fascinate you. And it is it's an introduction to somebody who is unquestionably a wonderful, wonderful poet. So that's next week with Maya Angelou. How are we doing? Are we getting? We're still waiting. We're still waiting for the late arrivals and the people looking for somewhere to park. So give it another minute or two, and then we'll get going. David from the UK, welcome. Good to have you back with us. That's the other big thing coming up. We will be presenting a set of readings, as we do every year, and now doing it online as a permanent feature, readings from James Joyce's Ulysses, celebrating Bloomsday. And this year, I think we've got 10 extracts, which we will start at, I think, 10 in the morning and finish at 9 in the evening. 10 readings from 10 of the chapters, and that'll be live on Wednesday, June 16th. It's just suddenly changed to, which is, of course, the date of Bloomsday, June the 16th, 1904. And so I hope you'll join us for that. You don't have to join us for the whole thing. We'd like you to. But each hour, every hour, on the hour, there will be an extract from Ulysses for you to listen to. So it's all there you can find it on Facebook, you can find it on the YouTube channel and various other sources. All the information will be on the website. And if you are one of our regulars, if you're on our email list, you'll be getting information about it in the same way you get information about the webinars. So that will be June 16th. That will be Ulysses, one of the most remarkable and important novels of the 20th century, and read by picked actors. So, the time being what it is, I think it's time that I introduce Tome, and we come back to our theme of the Harlem Renaissance. So, Tome, there you are. Welcome.
Hi, everyone.
To be back with us.
Yes, great to be back.
So, 2 weeks ago, we talked about the evolution of this Renaissance. There's two complex words straight away. Do you want to do a quick recap of what happened and how it happened? This what became a seismic explosion?
Sure. In a really quick nutshell, the actual movement itself was not first called the Harlem Renaissance. It was called the New Negro Movement, and it was coined from a anthology booklet that was written by Alan Locke, and it was called The New Negro, and it opened up the conversation of persons coming from the South with the Great Migration, coming from the South, working their way to the North for better lives, for better education of their families and their children, and financial gain, and because of the culture mixes, ultimately, we had city folk and then what would commonly known as country folk. So it was a way of being, a way of thought that was going to mix into these larger cities, larger communities in New York, Chicago, and Baltimore, where my family settled. They thought that was north, and they're still underneath the Mason-Dixon line. They stopped right there. Oh, we've made it, and so Baltimore was another hub that kind of had its own little renaissance, if you will, in a way, which is, we'll talk about that a little later on. But the idea was basically we could just put it into a terminology of old school versus new school, new way of thought. And this new being, this new person that was going to be educated and cultured, but retain a lot of the Southern rituals that came with it, which are a direct root from Africa, when you link them all together. So this new being, this new Negro was going to be the future. And so the atmosphere around that person or persons was going to be an environment, so it became this glowing, constant hunger for culture, a constant hunger and creation of knowledge. Literature became very much more important because everyone could read now. So it took on a very strong possibility of what I could be now, and what my children could be, and what their future generations could be. And so then that became a renaissance. Then it was kind of coined to that later on. That I would say is the bed of the whole.
Well, would it be safe to say that the primary desire and the ultimate achievement was education?
Yes, I say education.
And we're not just talking simple, ABCs and simple arithmetic. We're talking about education in its much broader context.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then also, there was the wonderful universities that black students could go to now in the South, but they're also where are you going to go after that? Like we're going to head to these. We're going to migrate to. We're not going to go deeper into the South. We're going to go more north. We're going to go into the bigger communities, these larger communities. So language, became a big thing. Now with that, like I said before, you were retaining some of the South. So slang, started becoming in. We have dialects, and certain passages and certain words and code words. So a language is developing in Harlem, in particular, in New York, because it's a hotbed, and also Chicago, a hotbed. So you're getting these new words, and code words, and because of that, you get a rhythm of how people speak. So that's adding into this new kind of person, this new flavor that, in particular, Harlem had. That was going to, create with it. Now, under that is music is changing, art is changing, literature is changing. So this person is developing in a way that is fascinating.
Which is why the term Renaissance is incredibly accurate in this sense. It was a new birth, and the phrase, as you say, that it came from, the new Negro. This was a new. It was an evolution of a whole facet of American society and culture coming together and finding something, a new way of expression, a new way of examining, just as the Italian Renaissance did. Where we got the word from. This was a massive growth because of the ability to develop. I don't want to say receive education, but to develop education within that community to learn.
Absolutely. And then we talked about also how the effects of like the military, like the World War, had a great deal of this. Young men were being they wanted to fight. But they couldn't fight for the U.S., so they had to go overseas and join the French army. But once they were there, they were treated a certain way that they were not treated in the United States. So a certain kind of liberty and freedom of expression was gained there. So when they returned, they had that pride with them. So that that it instilled in them, I am somebody. Basically, that little sentence. So you apply that equation to the new Negro equation, and you definitely have a new person. I've been overseas. I know what that's like. I'm going to try and find that here, regardless of what obstacles are being put in front of me. I'm going to live that life as that person.
But because I'm phrasing this carefully, you have this sudden exposure to the world from a group of people who had been confined to a very specific area and social condition, which was slavery, suddenly becoming exposed to not just the world in America and in the northern part of the nation, but to the world in general, and bringing that back. So this, as you say, this made probably Harlem and its equivalents in other cities, the true melting pot that, say, New York always described itself as, but in fact, in terms of a real melting together of different cultures, the Harlem Renaissance was that would be a very accurate description of what happened, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, for sure. For sure. The need and the want and the hunger of trying to recapture and relive that kind of, freedom knowledge. Not that I have this knowledge, it was great, And then I can speak another language. Some of them actually learned, to speak French. So I can actually I'm a little more cultured. So why can't I have that same thing here? And then we have the political, landscape going on. We talked about how religion figured into this. So all that's mixing in. We have, people bringing things from the Baptist church and the Pentecostal church, from the South to the North with them, so then we've got this hotbed. And then there's some who are rebelling, then we have the call of Muslims, and all that is cooking. All of that is generating. And I have a choice. Now I have choices. But before I didn't have a choice. I was told what I had to do, and still there are major obstacles because of the color of my skin. But I have a choice of how to fight back into it now. There's many ways. I don't always have to be coming across as an angry thing. I can come at it culturally as well. I can express. Now I can say, and there's many venues. So that's what I really wanted to kind of focus on today. The cultural the aspect of, because that's what everyone knows. I mean, that is the power of this movement that came about.
So carry on with that thought.
So I'm gonna pull up my notes because there's an awful lot of names here, and I want to get everyone get these their due. And I'm going to start. I think the way to approach this is a joint. Let's talk about it from the military aspect of it. Coming from that way, because it's a very unusual tie-in to the sound, to the music element that'll open up the entertainment, I guess, the entertainment world ultimately. So there was a gentleman. His name was James Reese Europe. And he was a musician. He was a composer, a band leader, an arranger, and he fought in the military, fought in World War I in Europe. And he was commissioned by the New York Army National Guard to create, he was a lieutenant, and to create a band, basically. He was a band leader. And so he created the 369th Infantry Regiment, which came to be known as the Harlem Hellfighters. And they went overseas to fight, and they were assigned to the French army. And he had this orchestra, and he created many songs there. And in his band was a vocalist and musician, Noble Sissel, who became very, very important later on in our story. But the Harlem Hellfighters, they recorded all over France. They recorded music. They created a march, Stars and Stripes Forever. I think everyone may be familiar if you heard it. It was a syncopated rhythmic song. There was another one that was a big hit that was called the Memphis Blues. And that particular song was led and orchestrated by Noble Sissel. And it introduced the ragtime-ish kind of upbeat music to France, to Europe in itself. So that's the kind of like how jazz kind of is starting to filtrate its way. It came from James Reese Europe. So now we have this sound, this collective orchestra that is military, actually, in its sound, but it has this certain kind of syncopated beat behind it. They all return to the United States, and Noble Sissel is introduced to another composer. His name is U.B. Blake in Baltimore, Maryland, and they decide to get together and form their own little duet. And it was I think they called it Dixie Duo, and they still were playing with Europe's orchestra, his band, and they wrote a song called "I'm Just Wild About Harry," and I think that would be the first, or one of the big first, transfers over from a ragtime-ish kind of sound to a kind of like a pop-ish kind of musical theater love ballad, if you will. And the song became a hit. And at the same time, James Europe was killed unfortunately in a I think a bar fight of some sort by a band member. And so then the two of them, Noble Sissel and U.B. Blake, struck out on their own and started writing more and more songs. Now in 1920, they were introduced to Flournoy E. Miller and Albury Lowes at an NAACP benefit. And Miller and Lowes were performers, and they were producers, veterans of black shows and black show business. And they thought that they wanted to bring a new type of theater to look at, to entertain the new Negro. And so they commissioned with Noble Sissel and U.B. Blake a show that would become Shuffle Along. And so Shuffle Along, this is 1921 we're talking now, and it was going to be, what they wanted it to be was an expression of Black theater, Black artists on the Great White Way, which was called the Great White Way because of the lighting, of the lights. But it also could be viewed for the patronage, who came to see the shows, who could afford to do it. But the idea of the initial show, Shuffle Along, was to lift up entertainment, I guess you will, for the new Negro. This is May, 100 years ago this year, Shuffle Along, May 23rd, 100 years ago this year. And then that, I think, changed everything. So we'll kind of stop there for a second and just make sure everyone's following that little train. Because there was a lot. That goes from James Europe to U.B. Blake to Noble Sissel to the Harlem Hellfighters returning back to the United States with this hit that was about to become a hit, I'm Just Wild About Harry. And then that influences heavily the sound of what was to become the Harlem Renaissance. Now the Harlem Hellfighters returned triumphantly. I left that little piece out. They returned to the United States. And so that event, when they returned to Harlem, was a massive parade. I mean, the first time America's welcoming home Black heroes, and they just happened to be a marching band on top of that. So imagine the parade. I mean, imagine the pageantry, of this and the hysteria around these men returning back home. And they were heroes. They did not lost not one member of their regiment in the entire war. They returned all intact. So that day, welcoming them back to Harlem was pretty amazing.
It was. You can see also, just from the way you describe it, this is evolution happening over an incredibly short period of time. Yeah. Which, I mean, I said it was an explosion, and it really was, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Consider that you're still here at just end of the First World War.
Yeah, and they returned 1921.
So they were busy.
Yeah,
they were busy,
yeah.
And again the fact that within this evolution that was happening, almost a revolution that was happening, you can see where the influences are coming from. It is not just internal; it is external. They're sucking in influences from so many. But I want to jump just slightly quickly to. You mentioned it last week. It was almost a kind of takeover of what had been the Dutch area of Manhattan Island. I mean, it's Harlem, named after the city in Holland. How complete was that takeover?
I think, from my understanding of it, it was gradual. They went from being domestic servants, so to the Dutch and the larger homes and then it just gradually crept in. I mean, it was just like a gentrification, if you will, a reverse, in a way.
Oh no, gentrification.
It just became Blacks became more affluent. They had money to burn, and they again had education, just to be doctors, lawyers. They want better lives and bigger homes, and so the brownstones, the famous brownstones in Harlem were taken over. Yeah.
As was you don't just take over the housing; you take the community itself.
Community, yes, absolutely.
You have a map.
No, yes.
Do you want to talk about what's the map?
Now the map this is a map later. This is from the 30s. This is when the Harlem Renaissance is full. We're talking 20 years later. Almost.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at the map, and then you can talk about the shift from the 20s on through. But let's take a look at the map to show people who don't know exactly where we're talking about, and they'll recognize some of the names on the map. And we got it there.
This is a drawing by Elmer Sims, 1933.
Right. We're trying to get it up on screen now. My colleague is trying to do that. Have we got it? Chat away while we get this.
Well, I'm just going to go on a little bit more about Shuffle Along, like the impact.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let's take you back to
so
that.
So the show itself was arrived on Broadway with it arrived already in debt. Like $21,000 in debt even before it opened. I mean, it just because it had to borrow hand-me-down costumes and sets and everything was from other little venues that they could just grab anything from. And what it was appealing to, again, was the white patronage on Broadway. And the idea of that was to have pretty women, but the look, this is kind of important, how it shifted skin tone became a thing. The chorus girl look, and this transferred later. It just went from Broadway, back uptown to the Cotton Club ultimately. The look of the woman that was going to be on stage, they all had to be a certain kind of skin tone, or the lighter toned. There was a paper bag test. They had to be lighter than a brown paper bag to be able to qualify to be on stage. Oh, here's our map.
Keep going. Go.
But so that was it. And in that, in these auditions, if you will, for the show, was a young girl. She auditioned several times, and she was rejected because of her skin tone. And this was Josephine Baker. So she was like a brown, beautiful complected, copper,
stunningly beautiful woman,
stunningly copper complected woman, and she was too dark. Even her shade was too dark. So she was rejected and rejected and rejected, and eventually they took her in as a replacement, and she was given the assignment of the last, and a chorus line. She was given the last woman on the line in these, and typically the last woman in these shows had a little comedy exit kind of thing, and she made the most of it. She basically became an upstager, if you will.
Yeah.
She knew what to do, and when the show decided to move on in certain ways, she joined another show called Ballet Negra, and it went overseas she went overseas with it, and because of the result of the James Europe phenomenon and jazz music and jazz, the element, she knew what she felt her environment, and she kind of like landed at the right time. The African art was very popular at the time in France when she got there, and she became like the woman. She knew how to exploit it, and she was exploited, but she was more in control of it. And so the legend of Josephine Baker is born. Now as a result of that groundwork, I'm just going to jump way ahead now. The groundwork that she laid there through her work and through the personage she became, going from Josephine Baker to La Baker, this very sophisticated, glamorous woman in her legend, and the combination of the scandal of the that she would create wherever she went, it laid the groundwork for people like Eartha Kitt and Grace Jones, who can just kind of step into this this world, this culture there, and things were expected of them. So you have two opposite extremes. You have Grace Jones, who we know is, she's this over the top, flamboyantly talented woman, this Amazon, and then you have Eartha Kitt, who is more of your chanteuse, she's a singer, cabaret. So you have these two opposites that both of them were Josephine Baker. So the culture was opened up. The groundwork for that was laid there right away. However, in America with the Harlem Renaissance, we were not ready for Josephine Baker. We were not ready. So she did make a return to the United States, but she was not as well received as I think she was expecting it to be, because we had not caught up with what had happened in Europe.
Yeah. So
that all is a stem from Shuffle Along, and it all goes back to James Europe. So I think he's really quite crucial to the idea of what the sound and the beat, that new Negro was going to be moving to that, And so then with that, we then eventually have the need for that to be exploited in some kind of way. And so is the creation of the Cotton Club comes about.
Yeah. Which I wanted to, I was going to jump to because you mentioned it, of what happened on Broadway goes back to the Cotton Club.
Yes, exactly. So the Cotton Club, I'm just going to try and give a little brief history of that. So in 1920, a heavyweight boxing champion, John Johnson, rented an upper floor of a building at 142nd Street and Lenox Avenue, which is right in the middle of Harlem. It's right there. And he opened a club called the Club Deluxe. Eventually, it was successful. And eventually, Oni Madden, who was a bootlegger, basically, he took over the club in 1923 and changed the name to the Cotton Club. So it expanded, and then it had the idea of having Black entertainment for white patrons to come. And so, but it had to be in this atmosphere that they thought they knew from the South. They knew of this new Negro, but it still had to have an element of the South involved in it, as well as an element of Africa involved in it. So everything inside the Cotton Club was like a jungle theme or like a plantation theme idea, but it was kind of blitzed up, but it still had to be based in something that the stereotypes we knew were. Duke Ellington was hired as the composer, and he was specifically told to create jungle music. So everything had to have a kind of percussive sound to it, even though he was admired, he worshipped James Europe's music. He still had to have this kind of sound to it that had a Congo-ish kind of beat to it. And the same format of the chorus women, light skinned. They had to be light skinned. Everyone who worked there had to have a certain look. So the Cotton Club is now the place to go uptown to experience this new Negro, this new phenomenon. And that's how it starts to be commercialized. And so now we are talking a renaissance. People want to know what this feels like to be a part of that. And that's when our map that we have, we had shown a couple of times, where all these little, if you couldn't get into the Cotton Club, you went to Small's Paradise. You had all these small little cafes and clubs that were all over the place. That just covered like about a 12-block radius of Harlem, but it's still centralized around the Cotton Club. Everything's spread out from there.
It's amazing number of, when you look at that, the proximity of so many places of entertainment.
Directly across the street from each other. I mean, like just club.
Which indicates that the popularity must have been phenomenal.
Yes. That
all of those places could do business. I mean,
yes.
It's like a club version of Broadway.
Right. Mm-hmm. And from at the Cotton Club, you have Chick Webb, you have Ethel Waters, you have Bessie Smith, the Mills Brothers. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. These performers. Now, one of them that we know, Lena Horne, came from, but her name was Leona Levinscourt at the time, and she was she was fair skinned and a beautiful dancer and a singer, and so she was one of the vehicles that got pushed onto the public because she could appease everyone. But she was, she has deep roots here. I think she's a Pittsburgher. I
think she is actually.
I think she's a Pittsburgher. Yeah. She made her roots and went there to New York, became a big star. Now here's where we've got simultaneously all that going on, and then in theater you have downtown again. We have the Federal Theater Project that was created, and we're talking the 30s now. I'm going to jump ahead there, but there was a need for entertainment like drama. Outside of Shuffle Along. So we're going, where do these actors go? What's happening here? So eventually became the push for the African theater, through the federal movement. So you've got a lot of stuff cooking on. I mean, going, you have, the Cotton Club happening. And then at a certain point, it reached a certain point of popularity that with Duke Ellington, he's being replaced. There's a new energy, a new Negro coming in, so a new energy is needed because we've got a combination now of this sophisticated person, but Duke Ellington is now he's being considered as being passé. So you have this new energy and a new performer called Cab Calloway, which I think is crucial to the what we are going to call the Zoot Suit era, I guess you will, of the Renaissance. He's a dynamic performer. He's a light-skinned man. He's got energy and he moves where Duke Ellington didn't necessarily move. Cab Calloway is a total entertainer. He's running across the floor. He's sliding around. He's whipping his hair around, so he's creating this frenzy of energy that every white person from downtown Broadway wants to experience. They want to see this. They want to experience this man, So you have him and you have Lena Horne.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's where I think the Renaissance took a big turn is when the Cotton Club decided to move downtown. So we don't really talk about that too much. Let me get this date because it moved into the theater district in downtown in 1936. So that's where it was from 36 to 1940. And that's when I think things took a big shift because it became so popular, that particular club, that when it shifts the location out of its environment, then it becomes a different thing. So that was part of the opening up of it. And at the same time, simultaneously, Hollywood, how can we capitalize? How can we make this for the masses? So then you get the films like Stormy Weather and Cabin in the Sky, which is, using those big stars, Cab Calloway, Bojangles, Fats Waller, we talked about the house parties, that last time, rent parties.
Yeah.
Last time, so you've got that culture going on as well, with a performer like Fats Waller, who started playing piano in parties like that. So Hollywood's trying to capitalize on that. So it's pulling and pulling and pulling in that direction. And I think that's had a great deal to do with in the Second World War, with the expansion, too much of a good thing.
Yeah.
Starts pulling apart. Another thing that we touched on the last session was literature. There was a play, there was a collaboration that was being worked on in 1930 by Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston called Mulebone. And they were great friends. They were part of the high literary community of the Harlem Renaissance. They were detailing it with great work. And they worked on this new musical. And somewhere along the line, their collaboration dissipated. And once that fell apart, the musical was never produced. We finally reached Broadway in 1991. So we're talking 1930, and the first production of it was 1991. And once those two entities, Langston Hughes and Zora Hurston, had their disagreements, I think that also contributed to the bust up of the Harlem Renaissance literary community. It started to dissipate. So you have that going on. And then at the same time, the films are coming in. So it was an end of a big creative period, I think.
It can't really. I mean, it's. I suppose it's one of the great truisms. The upsurge. I mean, I think in terms of classical theater and what have you. But we talk about the great golden age. We call it the golden age of Shakespeare, but it wasn't just Shakespeare. It was Marlowe and Greene and all the way through to Ford and Webster. This wonderfully creative period in theater writing, which was concentrated around where the money was, which was London. When they had to disappear into the woodwork, as it were, when they had, because of the arrival of the Puritan after the reign of Charles I, and it all dissipated, it never came back together again in that sense. So it is about the concentration of energies that makes you talked about the fact that the initial Renaissance coming from the New Negro and then the the Cab Calloway period. Once you've got concentration, you can keep having eruptions like a volcano. I'm mixing my metaphors terribly here. But then, once you've got a decent sized volcano, you can keep erupting in new ways. But once that dissipates, once that concentration dissipates, the creative energy dissipates as well. You're not working off one another.
Right. Exactly. It became a different world because everything was being commercialized.
And intriguingly, from the way you describe it, the commercialization was done by those creative artists themselves.
Yes.
In other words, when you talk about, performers of color, but only pale, the brown paper bag concept. that Josephine Baker was too dark, even though she wasn't.
And she wasn't, exactly. Right.
But
right.
but she didn't fit that established. And I suppose what we're talking about here is that which was acceptable to the white audience.
Yes, yeah.
Which, I mean, the kind of thing of making in later years in the 50s, making Nat King Cole wear pale makeup so that he wouldn't look too black on screen.
Yeah, exactly.
That it was a pandering in a way, but a pandering that made success possible.
Yeah, I mean, there is I'm going to pull up this tape because I think this is a very interesting. Let me get there. Where are we? Yeah, this is much later again, but in 1943 we're talking. Okay, so we've got two actresses. We have Lena Horne and one, and I'm going to get my camera. We have Lena Horne, and then we have this dancer, Katherine Dunham, who is a grande dame in black theater dance. They in 1 year, both films, Stormy Weather and Cabin in the Sky, are created. In the stage version of Cabin in the Sky, Katherine Dunham created a character. For the film version, she's also a very fair-skinned woman, beautiful. For the film version, she was replaced by Lena Horne because Katherine Dunham was too dark.
Yeah. So
here's Lena Horne replaced. Okay, but then Stormy Weather, they both are in the film. The same year, they both are in the film together. And I'm going, well, I can't imagine conversations, with these women, like over skin color, and makeup and lack of, and how society decides who can be and what is dark, and it's just stunning to me that it's that simple. It was just that simple. But both those landmark films were the same year, and they still today are viewed as go-to films.
It's extraordinary that even though shall we say, the commercial aspect of, certainly in terms of music and dance coming out of this, the remarkable place called Harlem, even though the commercial aspect tended to dominate it down to the conditioning of who could appear and who could not appear, nevertheless, the quality of art and the quality of music didn't suffer. It grew.
No. And speaking of that, I just wanted to touch on the art world, like the art world by itself. Yeah. There's a fascinating woman. I think to this day, she really should have her due. Her name is Augusta Savage. Just a remarkable artist, sculptress, painter. Everyone should look her up. She's crucial to the development of pride in Black culture for the Harlem Renaissance. The idea of monuments, like gigantic monuments of people, she's directly responsible for that. So she's another one, Aaron Douglas. Another name is Hale Woodruff, Archibald Motley. These are just landmark artists who I still don't feel have been given their due, particularly in this period. They are just remarkable artists. The photographer James Vanderzee, he documented everything that was going on, transpiring with the fashion and with culture and religion during the Renaissance.
There's a question just popped up there, which I think directly relates to what you were just saying, because you're talking about quality artists who've never really been given full recognition or given their due. The question there, did art during the Harlem Renaissance address colorism or intentionally skirt around it?
I'm not going to say skirt around it. They rose above it. It wasn't even, it was like, I'm going to go above it, because we know it exists, but this is our world right here. We're going to go above it. And particularly, I'm going to speak to an example would be someone like James Vanderzee, the photographer. He specifically was about the glorification of the Black race. So he was going to do everything possible in his photographs, in his images that he took to enhance everything. He's going to glorify the beauty of children and the churches and everyone he shot, regardless of what the economic situation was. He was going to correct it. So there's no imagery of anything downtrodden, slum-like, destitute, everything is in the positive. So that was the goal, the overall goal of everyone in the Harlem Renaissance, is to expose that, the glorification of it. Now, underneath that, writers like Langston Hughes, for example, are going to go kind of bitter, with things that happened to them personally. But it's the why. Is it not that I'm stuck there? It's the why I'm getting out of it. This is why I'm rising above it.
Well, it is, because every society has a multitude of facets and layers. And yes, there was poverty. But
Yes.
there was poverty in the white community. There was poverty in the Irish community, in the Jewish community, in just about every other community, the Chinese community. But there was also wealth. And we always think, well, there's poverty and there's wealth. But then there is that ladder of achievement and the ladder of success that was happening just as much for the Black community as it was for anybody else. And yet, for some strange reason, we still don't seem to recognize it. We see the effect of it in terms of art as it's come to us and as we now see it, but we don't seem to recognize the journey that we used that term last week. It was a veil of tears, in a funny way, rather like that for the Native American, of the journey from the poverty and the slavery of the South. To the achievement or the potential for achievement.
I look at it. To the epitome, of it all. I look at it. I envision a family on a tractor, or a truck, like a Black version of the Beverly Hillbillies, basically. With everything, because we don't have those images. We don't have those images, so we have to kind of go there. We just don't have that kind of representation in images. Seeing them coming, from the South to the North, and just in a year and a half later, they arrive and they are able to go and see something like the Nicholas Brothers. They can't even conceive it. They cannot even conceive two Black men that are brothers that are so successful in show business that they're beyond dazzling, they're beyond acrobatic, and they're in tuxedos. And it's a class act. The clash of those two cultures, I think,
still regarded as possibly the greatest partnership tap dance performers ever.
We have something here of the Savoy Ballroom, absolutely. Savoy Roseland, even. I mean, all of these. The Savoy Ballroom in Harlem, absolutely. Absolutely.
Lindy Hopping. Any other venues or groups associated with the advancements of social dances in Harlem? Most of them, I would imagine,
developed in Harlem. Absolutely. I mean, the Lindy Hop was an expression. The Lindy Hop came about because of Charles Lindbergh, making his flight, his transatlantic flight, and it became a dance. And it's actually and the Shorty George. I mean, all these little code names. Here's a little bit of dance history here. This is during the Zoot Suit era, and this is for all those jazz dancers out there, just so they get a little bit of knowledge here. So when I would say to someone, do a jazz hand, everyone would do this. Basically, they do like some kind of expressive hand. And in fact, that is not a jazz hand. That is what has become a jazz hand. I'm going to turn my hands laterally if I can. A bent hand this way, a bent hand, with your elbows glued to your rib cage and your hands dropping in front. That is what was known as a jazz hand for the Lindy Hoppers, and an extension of what we talked about, the Southern man who came to from the South. And he's now in Harlem, and he's a new Negro. Then high-waisted pants were very popular. They're very, very, very high. Before they put suspenders on their pants, that's how they kept their pants up, by locking their elbows into their sides. And so they danced with their hands and all this kind of movement. So that became jazz hands. And so a choreographer, his name was Jack Cole, at the time was going up to Harlem. He was one of the people from Broadway that went up to Harlem to get these new dance steps. He saw that and he developed that style. He took that and made it into what became ultimately the first jazz ballet, which was Sing, Sing, Sing. other piece of music. But that is a little piece of movement history that is part of the Harlem Renaissance.
There is always a practical
Yeah,
reason for every fashion.
yeah, exactly. And part of that is thank you for whoever who put that, Nicola. Yeah, put that in from the Savoy Ballroom. All that relates back to that, to Lindy Hopping, and it's pretty amazing. But the Lindy Hop is coming from freedom, complete freedom of abandon, and a mixture of Southern dances. Because there's no worry about culture. I don't have to look.
It was because it was, how would I describe it? Profoundly sexy.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this was
and acrobatic.
It was acrobatic. It was it was seductive.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I use the word, orgasmic almost.
Yes. Yeah.
There was a degree of passion and a freedom of expression. That's the important point.
Yeah.
A freedom of expression, and again, we use the word freedom. We're very conscious of what that truly means when we are talking about the two generations prior to the Harlem Renaissance. Freedom was a very potent word, and the freedom to express, and the freedom to behave, and the freedom to think, and the freedom to imagine is expressed in a lot of this, what we sort of categorize as jazz dance.
Isn't it amazing? It's amazing.
Yeah. I think it's wonderful. It's rather, I mean, this is slightly facetious, but something very similar happened 30 odd years ago, or 20 odd years, I can't remember now, in Ireland, which where the tradition of Irish dancing had been dominated by the Catholic Church for generations, where everybody danced with their hands firmly at their sides and nothing moved above the knee. And suddenly river dance happened.
Yeah, they have it.
And it was an explosion. When those two dancers came onto the stage, it was an explosion of freedom. And suddenly, what we call Irish dancing, but suddenly found a new freedom, which was actually a very old freedom. The realization that this was fertility dancing.
Okay.
And so when I look at that, when you look at the Lindy Hop, when you look at Nicholas Brothers, when you look at any of that, you see this explosion of passion and freedom that didn't seem to exist on the dance floor prior to that.
No, not at all. Or it was at the Cotton Club. It was controlled, and performed. It was polished, and it's a whole different thing. There's a question, and I just want to answer this question in the chat. With Cabin, no, it's Mark Connolly. Cabin in the Sky was written by Mark Connolly, M-A-R-C, correct, and then Connolly, C-O-N-E-L-L-Y, I think. And let's just talk about what you just said. The expression and the freedom. So now we have overseas, like we have this phenomenon of Josephine Baker, yes, and the films one big film she's making wanted to capitalize on that element, to make her back into this creature, kind of African creature. But she's so cultured now, it was difficult, for her to retain that, So it's odd how things work commercially, what's popular and what's acceptable and what's not, and that's still to this day, I think.
Yeah. I love the phrase you used in response to that, not skirting round, but rising above.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
and it seems to be true. I mean, I think it is true just about of everything to do with the culture of the Black culture of that period, and subsequently, that it always rises above. When it is successful, it is about rising above. It is about not trying to be equal to or compared with, but of itself rising above.
Mm-hmm. It was always about that. Always.
Yeah.
There's a question in the chat. When the Cotton Club moved to Broadway, did the financial success? No, the money never went to the Black community. It was all mob owned. No. that didn't.
New York in that period was, yeah, the financial truth of Manhattan and Broadway and all of that was very much, shall we say, not entirely legal.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
But people still made money. The individual artists still made money.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. Yeah. I mean, they survived. They survived. I mean, you made your mark. And then you also did take your chances and head to Broadway. With these skills. You did go trade, I guess, if you could. And there was a great deal. There's a whole phenomenon of passing. That was also going on in particular with very light-skinned blacks at the time, because of the acceptance, of what was expected and what could happen. So they were passing as white, to get higher grade work, and so there's that whole part of the Renaissance that not many people talk about. Then there's the whole gay aspect of it. The nightclubs there and the performances and the joy. Imagine the fashion. I mean, the creative work that was going on.
We've got about 10 minutes left. The result, and obviously one of the big things, I mean, that I love, the big band sound that came out of that, as part of the jazz evolution that you mentioned. Duke Ellington, who, aside from his own creativity, was confined in the Cotton Club to a particular kind of music, a particular kind of tone. But nevertheless, as to use your phrase, rose above it, also produced remarkable jazz. You had Cab Calloway,
Louis Armstrong. I mean,
Louis Armstrong was a perfect example of that. I mean, a phenomenal, a singer of questionable quality, but played the trumpet like phenomenally, and the music that he created, all the way through to Count Basie and to others. This was a natural line of development that was rising above anything else that was put in their way. They were creating new sound.
Yeah, you go on. I mean, the big band sound, just like you said, and then it became the need. We get Tommy Dorsey's orchestra. You get these white, gigantic orchestras that are trying to take this same sound and blend it over to a more homogenized, acceptable kind of sound. But in front of it, okay, how can I make this formula work for the best? So you start to put singers like a young Billie Holiday there. You start to put singers like young Ella Fitzgerald there. So you're getting this mix of the best and the old. This new thing that can kind of appease to it. Then you get singers, lush singers. Now I'm going to bring a white woman in here, but she has a very lush sound for that period because she was influenced a lot by the sound of the Harlem Renaissance. But Doris Day actually has a very rounded, earthy sound to her, that is heavily influenced from listening to those kind of recordings that you're hearing, the blues recordings, but you don't hear it. You have to really, really listen, but it's there, But I'm going to say, particularly Ella Fitzgerald, really, brought that sound. She's coming from the earth with that, a new sound. Is being created.
Would you say? I mean, in terms of jazz development, would you say? I mean, when I think immediately of Miles Davis, that his use of the instrument he played was an expression of. He didn't just play the trumpet; he talked with it. He made poetry with it.
Yeah.
Is that? Would you say from that similar line of development?
I'm going to say, yes. I'm going to say before him was Charlie Parker.
Of course,
Charlie Parker really, put that in there. That earth and experimentation and the risk and and then Louis Armstrong, and Jelly Roll Morton. They're coming from New Orleans. They brought that to them.
Well, Jelly Roll Morton. And Louis Armstrong, it is. What I'm saying is that there is a traceable line of development from that same explosion.
Absolutely. And all of them played through the Cotton Club, except with the exception of Jelly Mo Morton. He had passed away by then. But Louis Armstrong had gone through the Cotton Club. So it there's that bed of work that's being created, a new sound. Yeah.
Okay, so look, in the 4 or 5 minutes we got left. First of all, if people want to know more about, find out more about, I wonder, would you let us have a list of things people might read? Just 4 or 5.
I would say that I have to get it myself.
Okay, well, if you get it, we'll put it up on the website.
Oh no, yeah. But I was going to say, it just came out like last week. There's literally a book about Shuffle Along. Yeah. I mean, literally, it's a brand new book that is just. I just from reading a little bit that I saw, be worth. It's a history. It's going to give you a big history of like Harlem, I think.
Right. Well, we'll put any information up on the website about that. What do you? I mean, looking now, here we are in the world in the nearly post-COVID period. Do you still see echoes now of this explosion?
Yes. Yes. How would I put that in? I would say like the idea of in Black art in particular, that I can do anything. I think that's the idea. Like every time I can reinvent myself constantly. I can take on and be a singer. I can be a sculptor. I can be a painter. I can be a piano. All of those multi-faceted talents, I think, are because of the Harlem Renaissance. I really do. I think it all goes back to that. I think now the idea of how the band leaders on all these talk shows, they're now personas. They actually have lines in the talk show. They actually create. I think that's a result of Cab Calloway. Taking on, a persona and being an entertainer, not just leading the orchestra. I can actually be part of this. So I think that you have to really do your digging, but it's really there, all of it. The idea of political, the political doing things for the community. Like I'm doing this because of the community. I want to better. I'm going to go back to Harlem. I'm going to go back to my neighborhood and clean this block up. Like community awareness. I think goes back to the Harlem Renaissance, like pride of your neighborhood, so it has many different looks to it.
It's everything you say there just sort of confirms that notion that was established with that concept of the new Negro, that a new identity materialized, a new sense of identity materialized and as we talked about it last time, when we talk about African American, it's too generic a term because Africa is a continent, but so many different groups, so many different backgrounds coming together and homogenizing in this wonderful explosion of creativity. Mm-hmm. Do you feel the influence from the club was expressed and accepted more liberally into the 70s with Soul Train?
Well, I'm going to say, yeah, it's the same kind of marketing. I guess you would if you're going to bring like American Bandstand would kind of be like Broadway, I guess, and then Soul Train would kind of be like the Cotton Club, if you will, if you kind of look at it like that, and then you kind of bring it in, like you, absolutely, yeah. I never thought about it like that, but yes, I'm going to say for me, yes.
Yep, there you go. Yeah. All right, Tome, we've run out of time. Thank you so much. This has been brilliant 2 programs. I think we've all got an education out of this. I know I have. When you give me some 2 or 3 things that people might read,
yes.
We will put them up on the website so that you'll have a reference. Anybody will have a reference to go read about it. I'd love to get you back sometime. I know you are frightfully busy. You have a production opening next week. Thank the Lord.
Yes.
And let's pray that it doesn't rain away. But anyway, very best of luck with that. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank
and we
you.
will see you soon in the future.
Bye, everyone.
And for everybody else, thank you for being with us. Next week, we will be discussing the poetry of Maya Angelou with my guest Montez Freeman, and we will be announcing what we're going to be doing for the rest of the month at that point. Yet again, can I just say thank you to the Allegheny Foundation for their support for the webinars. Can I say, do check out the YouTube channel and sign up on it, because all the webinars that we've given in the past, they're all there. You can go back and look at them, and you can still ask questions or complain about them anytime you like. And more information next week, and it'll be on the website, about our celebration of Bloomsday in June, on June the 16th. In the meantime, have a wonderful week. Take care of yourselves. If you haven't been vaccinated yet, get one, because they're freely available in the States at the moment. For those of you in Ireland and in the UK, I think you're doing pretty well. In Ireland, my heart goes out to you, but it'll all be coming right soon. And for anybody else in the rest of the world, I hope you've been vaccinated too. In the meantime, do take care, and we'll see you next week. Bless you. Bye.